have. I know. I have to go out tonight instead of watching American Idol repeats. Yes.
Now, before we get going, I want for you to share with everyone your journey in terms of how you became a psychologist and why you became a psychologist.
Long story. Actually, it was when I was young. When I was 10, I had a stroke, which paralysed my right side, and I couldn't speak. And in those days, there wasn't a lot that people could do for children who had strokes, and there was some physio and some OT, occupational therapy available, but there wasn't a lot in terms of what do you do when to cope when you're this young, and then you have to learn to walk and talk all over again, and how do you go back to school and integrate with your friends, and how do you integrate with your family and be in a wheelchair and all of that sort of stuff. So I guess, I guess a lot of people are discovering who they are in their teenage years. I was doing the kind of early crawling, walking, talking things again, and so that's where my kind of interest in neuropsychology started, and so yeah, that's generally how. And then I decided, okay, I'll go to uni, study psychology, kind of get a sense of whether this is for me, and it turned out to be exactly what I wanted to do. So I guess as a child you just want to get back to normal, and so it was very obvious within my friend group that they wanted to kind of push the wheelchair around and just help me out. But of course there was always the as time went on and I started to walk again and talk again, I was kind of the last one picked on the teams, and I hated PE and all of that stuff. So it was all that was a bit tricky in those days, and I really kind of focused much more on the academic side of life rather than the sporting side of life from then on, because I'd kind of figured that my body wasn't the same. It's still not the same. Drive a modified car, and my first time skiing was kind of interesting because my, one foot goes this way, one foot goes that way, so it's, you fall on your face pretty quickly.
So do I. So, don't try and claim that as being special.
Oh, okay. Sweet, okay. I guess one of the things my dad said to me early on was, look, you'll probably be able to do everything that everyone else can do, but you'll just probably take a lot longer, and you'll have to adapt and to do it in a new way. So that's and that's kind of been the case. So
you're a parent now. How what you've brought through as a child into being a parent? Have you really had to be a little more hyper aware of that, or adapt, or it's just been a natural thing?
No, it's not been a natural thing. I think that's a big myth, to be honest.
Does everyone believe that? I think it is a myth.
I just don't know if there's such a thing as the kind of the perfect mum. I'm certainly not, and I think one of the things that this experience has taught me is that that there is no perfect. That imperfect is enough, and how do I be a good enough mum, and how do I keep in mind what's most important to me. I want to be a compassionate, responsive mum. And so when Clara wakes in the middle of the night for the 50th time, or it feels like the 50th time, and I just kind of boiling with rage, what do I do in that moment? And I think it's in those sort of moments that you're kind of confronted with a bit of a choice point of like, do you just let that emotion out and go, I could just go to sleep, which of course is going to make her more and more upset, or do you go, okay, Mummy's a bit frustrated, and it's going to be all right. So I think actually the main work that I end up doing with people is around values, and what that sounds kind of a bit airy-fairy, but what that means is that all of us need to ask ourselves, who do I want to be in this world? How do I want to behave? What sort of partner do I want to be? What sort of relationships do I want to build? Do I want to be, for example, adventurous, confident? Do I want to be assertive? Do I want to be kind, caring, generous? Do I want to be, what else, kind of working in terms of power? Do I, what do I really, really want? And when people spend some time working out their own values, they can then say no to some of the demands that come upon them, because it's kind of like, how does this work with my values? Can I? And oftentimes I'll ask people, how much of the last week, how much of the last week were values in your mind? And people kind of go, oh, no, I kind of just got caught up in other people's stuff. And so I think authenticity begins with knowing who you want to be in the world and how you want to live, and sticking to that, because we're all going to stuff up and kind of get caught up in people pleasing and perfectionism and control and all of that stuff. But if we know who we want to be, then there's a kind of a meaning and purpose that comes from that.
But how do you say no? Because there's an art to say no. I can be in a meeting, work related, and there are people that are so skilled within a work environment, not only politically, but in terms of getting outcome. I don't know if you've seen that in your own day, where you can be, within a realm, you think, wow, they've really moved things along, and you've kind of come out with exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a real art to that. There's a real art for asking for something, but also there's an art to saying, no, actually, that's not quite right for me. What's that art? Tell me, how do you say no?
Well, I think it's, again, about kind of observing and describing what is important to you. So let's say you're absolutely overloaded and someone else kind of puts something on your plate. It's kind of like, well, look, I've got this on my plate at the moment. Which of these things need to fall off for me to do the thing that you want me to do? So it's kind of like sharing the dilemma. Because I think otherwise women in particular get caught up in doing more and more and more, working harder and harder, and then suffering themselves as a consequence, and the work or the partner or the child or whatever thrives, and there's the woman kind of in exhaustion down on the floor. And that's what I see in my clinic. What I talk to a lot of people about is the gap between what you want and what you've got. And in that gap is usually frustration and disappointment and maybe failure and all of these things that we're not taught how to deal with. People are kind of like, no, if you work hard enough, you'll get the goodies at the end. Well, I don't know if it's worked out like that for you. Certainly hasn't for me. And so it's kind of like, well, how do you deal with these, I guess I'd call them negative emotions, but I'd actually just call them emotions, but people call them negative emotions. How do you deal with disappointment and frustration and pain and, and all of the things that life throws at us and continues to throw at us? It's not like we can kind of get to a point and go, oh sweet, I've done that, I've done the hard stuff. So I do talk a lot about that gap and how to be in that gap and how to experience those emotions without running away from them or trying to control them. I don't think it's possible to be happy, and actually, I don't know if anyone's seen the TED talk on YouTube or on TED by Brené Brown, where she talks about the power of vulnerability. And one of the things that she mentions is you can't selectively numb. So you can't experience only joy, happiness, and the good stuff. You have to experience the kind of the pain and the disbelief and the heartache and all of that, and that they're actually two sides of the same coin, and that kind of courage and kind of strength come from that sense of vulnerability. And it's only, I think, when we get to that point of, I don't know what to do, I'm struggling, that like a lot of us try and kind of soldier on, which, but actually we're built to reach out to other people in that moment and connect with others. And I think that's that's the message that hasn't got out yet. Everyone's still kind of trying to soldier on, and everyone's still coming into my office going, oh, I don't know how anyone else is doing it, but I'm not coping and I just need to cope again. I'm like, oh, newsflash, if you were sitting where I am, you'd know that no one else is doing any much better than you are. Yeah, I've got mixed thoughts about that, because there's actually quite a lot of research that you've probably heard of around gratitude and the importance of being grateful, and 3 good things a day, and there's some good research that doing that and noticing 3 things that have gone right in the day and being grateful for those increases happiness. What I have a problem with is when people, I guess, misunderstand that and kind of go, oh, all of this. So a lot of people come into my office and they say, all of this stuff's going on, it's really, really hard, but I just should be grateful. And so they're using gratefulness as a way to beat themselves up. And I don't think that's useful, because it's actually just another way of beating themselves up. So again, it's kind of like, if it works for you, if it's helpful for you, then keep doing it. If it makes you feel guilty and crap, give it away. Well, I guess actually I would say all emotion has a reason for being. So whatever shows up in my office in terms of emotion, there's a reason for it. So oftentimes, again, it's women who come in who've got a heck of a lot on, and they'll be really, really anxious because they can't please everybody, because after a while everyone knows, oh, to get something done you give it to this person, but then there's a limit to that person, and so they come in and they go, oh, just help me cope, let me be able to deal with this, but actually what needs to happen there is that the anxiety is saying something. It's saying something else. Something has to change. It's got a message, and oftentimes people want the quick fix for anxiety or depression without thinking about the message it's delivering. Oftentimes people get really sad because they've got, and this is going to sound terrible, but they've got really sad lives. Like they don't have people in their lives, or they have lost somebody, or they've experienced a number of losses, and so it's appropriate.
Does it make them worse though when you say, but you've just got a sad life? Like, how do you deliver that message? Because I think you're right. I meet lots of people in my job, and I do, some of them, I think, that's so sad.
Yeah.
That's incredibly sad.
Yeah,
What do you tell them though?
It's not quite like that. Yeah, I don't say it quite like that, but I kind of say, actually, this makes sense. It makes total sense that you're where you are because of what's happened to you. But most people, when they feel these things, they don't want to feel them, and so they fight against them. And so as soon as you give up the fight and you go, oh, so anxiety's here, or oh, depression's here. Oh, okay. Can I live my values even though anxiety's in my pocket, or I've got depression in my on my backpack, and so there's a level of relief that comes from not fighting the emotions that we've been basically taught to fight.
Mary, as always, I've loved chatting with you.
Cool. Oh, it's always good to have a chat.
Any final questions for Mary? She's going to hang around, so if you'd prefer just a quick chat. Oh, have you got one? Did you? You were scratching your head as well. What is it with you and Nick? You're in my eye.
Cool,
hey, thank you. That was great. Fantastic. Cool. Give her a round of applause.